Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Frederick Winsmus with NetHope, and I want to welcome everyone to another NetHope Solution Center webinar. Today, we're starting a series sponsored and produced by the Crisis Informatics team at NetHope. And the topic today is newest lessons in using open data effectively. There will be two more of these, and Gabby will be from NetHope, Gabby Allman will be talking a little bit about the series as a whole. Before we get underway, I want to make sure we go over a little bit of housekeeping. You are all muted at this point, and thank you very much for keeping your lines muted to minimize background noise. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We hope to have some time towards the end today with some Q&A and discussion. So please line up your questions in the chat window, and we'll facilitate that towards the last 10-15 minutes of the hour today. We also, as usual, we're going to ask you to fill out a webinar satisfaction poll. So that will be opened up the last 3-4 minutes as well. And we'll appreciate any feedback that you have, both on what you think about today's session as well as suggestions for future topics. And we are recording this, so please look for a follow-up email, and we will post both the recording and all the presentation slides and collateral on the NetHope Solution Center, and that will be pointed to in the follow-up email. So with that, I want to introduce Gabby Allman. She is the GIS and Data Analyst Technical Lead at NetHope and part of our Crisis Informatics team. And she will be introducing our speakers today. So Gabby?
Yes, thank you, Frederick. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is joining us today, depending on where you're calling in from. As Frederick mentioned, I'm happy to represent the Crisis Informatics team at NetHope, and we are putting on a series, a 3-part series for you guys on how to utilize the open resources that are available to us in the humanitarian world, starting today with open data specifically. We are so grateful to have two of our industry's thought leaders on our call today. We have Godfrey Takavarasha from the United Nations Office of Humanitarian Affairs. He currently serves as a data manager for UNOCHA's Humanitarian Data Exchange, which we'll learn more about towards the end of this call. And he previously served as an ICT officer in Zimbabwe. So thankful to have him. First up, we'll be listening to Mahari O'Hara, who is a GIS trainer and technical project manager at Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, also known as HOT, where she develops sustainable data collection processes focused around OpenMapKit and oversees the development of the activation curriculum and the export tool. So without further ado, we'll dive right into the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We'll also be we'll be answering those towards the end and opening it up as well at the end. So thank you so much, Mahari. Passing it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. So I'm just going to share my screen now and start the presentation. So just want to make sure that everyone can see the slide.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, thank you, Gabby, for that introduction. So yeah, I've been with HOT now about for 2 years. So I'm just going to go and talk a bit about what OpenStreetMap is and what our organization HOT do as well, before going into some of the more open data and the tools surrounding OpenStreetMap. So what you're seeing here is a visualization of geospatial data being mapped in OpenStreetMap over 6 months of Dar es Salaam. And this data was mapped in an attempt to help with the flooding that occurs in Dar es Salaam. So the project set up by HOT. So just going into a bit of what OpenStreetMap is, I'm not sure if everyone knows about it, but it's basically a free geospatial database. So you could say that it's the Wikipedia version of Google Maps. And the data is created through, a lot of it is through crowdsourcing. It can be through projects that are funded, but it's basically free to use for any purpose as long as you credit contributors. And currently there are over 2 million registered users. So this is just an example of if you're comparing Google Maps to OpenStreetMap. So at the top you've got Google Maps, and in the bottom you've got OpenStreetMap. And this is Dar es Salaam, what you saw in the visualization clip. So you can see that in the OpenStreetMap map, you've got a lot more detail down to building level. And this is important because in some areas, especially remote areas, they're not even on the map. So places in the United States or in Europe, on Google Maps, it might be very well mapped out, but in places that are quite rural and remote, they're not even on the map, and 8 million people are not even accounted for. So having this level of detail is really useful to have geospatial information for areas where humanitarian processes are being carried out. So OpenStreetMap being a open geospatial database, there's also a number of open source tools that have been built around the ecosystem to help create data for the for OpenStreetMap to get it in there. And so you've got different levels as well because it's a crowdsourced data set. You've also got different levels of people that have experience at creating this data. So in the bottom left window, you've got this is an online GIS tool called ID Editor, where you can easily, it's a very simple interface to have people creating your different, mapping your different features by digitizing, tracing over satellite imagery. And then you can easily add in different attributes that are related to those different geospatial data. If you're creating polygons or polylines or just points for a point of interest. And then at the top, you've also got a little bit more advanced desktop GIS tool called JOSM, where you can do a lot more advanced data creation or data editing or data validation for OpenStreetMap data. So that was a little bit about OpenStreetMap, a very quick overview. But so our organization, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, we're really, this is our sort of slogan, that we apply the principles of open source and open data sharing for disaster response and economic development, but we've really sort of expanded to do a lot more than that. We're quite a small nonprofit organization. There's only about 40 staff members currently, but 3,000 volunteers worldwide. So we're 99% volunteer-based. And what we do is we really try to help coordinate communities and volunteers to produce, not only produce, but to contribute data towards OpenStreetMap, and also to train people in use of the data itself, but also tools surrounding OpenStreetMap, and then how they can apply that data as well for different purposes and needs. So this is just to show where we've HOT has had projects throughout the globe. So We also look at raising money, raising grants to fund mapping projects, to give micro grants, and we also build tools and help to strengthen communities. And we also respond to mapping needs following the event of disasters such as earthquakes, floods, landslides, epidemics, and refugees. So we have a variety of kinds of projects scattered around the globe, which I'll talk a bit more in the next slide. This is just an example of one of the projects that we're currently doing, and this is one that I'm overseeing. It's in Indonesia, and this is working with the Indonesian National Disaster Management Agency, BNPB. And what we're doing is we have a fairly sizable team on the ground in Indonesia helping to map different features that you can see on the slide. So we're looking at different financial, communication, transportation, emergency services, as well as government buildings and administrative boundaries, to map those to, which will be, it's mapped in OpenStreetMap, but that data is going to be pulled into this, into InAware, which is a web-based disaster monitoring and early warning decision support system that was developed by the Pacific Disaster Center for BNPB. So basically, it brings in all these different, it brings in and consolidates hazard information and alerts from various sources to help with disaster management capabilities. And pulling in, by mapping this key lifeline infrastructure data, we're helping them to be able to have a good overview and make better disaster management decision making. So this is just an example of the administration boundaries that we were mapping. So we were working in Surabaya, which is the second largest country in Indonesia, and then now we're also working in Jakarta, the capital. So to map out the administration boundaries, because this changes quite quickly from year to year, we actually have a team of local data entry specialists sitting down with village leaders to identify and discuss the admin boundaries, and then together they draw the current boundaries onto a printed map, which is then digitized back in the office in OpenStreetMap, so that data is then available in OpenStreetMap to be pulled into the InAware platform, but also available for anyone else to use for their own purposes. And this is just an example of, so for some of the water systems, collecting pumping station information is important because in Jakarta it floods quite a lot. So this is just to give you an overview of what attribute information is also collected. So, and that's one of the key important aspects of OpenStreetMap. Not only is it, it might be more detailed in some areas, but you can also have access to attribute information so that you can see things like how many building levels are there, what is the building structure made out of, the condition, things like that, that can also be pulled into hazard models. So this is another project that we're currently doing, and it's looking at the refugee crisis in Uganda and Turkey. So these, Uganda is taking in a lot of refugees from South Sudan, and Turkey, there are a lot of Syrian refugees that are coming into Turkey. So how HOT is helping in there, we're doing a lot of mapping to help improve program planning and service delivery to refugee communities, and in an attempt to develop better integration with the host communities and build refugee self-reliance through OpenMap data. So we're actually going in and training and equipping community leaders in refugee communities to map vulnerabilities and assets in the places that they're currently living in. Another project that is currently going on is the Malaria initiative through the Clinton Health Access Initiative. And this is really, it's not on the ground. We're just doing this remotely by digitizing buildings and identifying areas of settlement in 7 countries across the globe. So we're hoping to, like with this information, the initiative is hoping to work with governments to scale up interventions for prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and surveillance of the infection, and hoping that it can help reduce the number of cases, as there's close to 500,000 people die each year and 400 million fall ill, with a large percent of this being women and children under the age of 5. So this is this slide is just to show some of the partners that HOT have worked with and are working with on some of the projects. So we really work with all different types of institutes. We work a lot with universities, with governments, with nonprofits, and just with individuals that are interested in getting in touch and seeing how they can contribute and work together. So, as I mentioned, we do we really do 3 different types of work. There's the disaster mapping, community development, and we also do technical projects. So the disaster mapping, which I mentioned a bit before. So this is just an example of one of the disaster mapping. So this is really when a disaster happens and there's a request from different organizations to help with mapping the area that has been impacted, so that we can get the map data to people responding to the disaster itself. So in 2014-2016 in Western Africa, there was the Ebola epidemic that hit Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia. And what HOT did was we really coordinated the greater OpenStreetMap community to help them be able to get to. We set up projects on our tasking manager, which really helped to organize the mapping efforts. And we had over 4,000 volunteers from 100 countries come together to assist and do the mapping in these 3 countries. We asked for them to help with mapping information on roads, where major towns and villages were, power infrastructure, building, sanitation, to help those that were deploying resources on the ground. And this is just an animation of Momo in Guinea. This was all mapped within 29 hours from 68 contributors mapping an entire city. I think they've mapped around over 20,000 buildings. And this is just to show the power of crowdsourced information, the power of the numbers, that they can really get all this data mapped quickly when it's needed and within tight deadline. And once that data is mapped, then we were able to give it to partners like Doctors Without Borders, who would then use these maps to navigate on the ground. The Nepal earthquake, we also helped to respond to when they were hit. The earthquake struck in April 2015. So again, we were asked to, we collaborated with Kathmandu Living Labs, who were based out there, and even then they were stuck outside mapping, helping with getting all that data into OpenStreetMap. And we had a great turnout with 8,000 people worldwide helping to map. I think that was like one of the biggest responses from our global community of volunteers. And they mapped an area of over 6,000 square miles in 4 days, looking at road networks, hiking trails, built-up areas, and building footprints. And this is an example of a map that was used for IDP camps. Sri Lanka this year, so heavy rains in Sri Lanka caused floods and landslides. So, and they urgently needed detailed housing unit information, which was requested by the World Bank, the Global Fund for Disaster Risk Reduction. They requested if we could help them map those building units in OpenStreetMap. So that was when HOT is helping with the disaster mapping and responding to in the event of a crisis. So the other part that HOT really focuses on is community development. And this is where a lot of our projects are focused. A lot of our funded projects are focused on training and sharing knowledge and skills to local communities. And we're really teaching them about OpenStreetMap, the concepts and associated tools behind it, training local communities to increase awareness and to give them the necessary skills to improve perhaps their own living conditions. As I mentioned before, so it's a lot of the time we work with universities, but also nonprofits, government officials, and independent individuals through Missing Maps organization who host a lot of mapathons, which do sort of like short training within a day and then get on to doing mapping remotely with satellite imagery. And we're really we have a big focus on the inclusion of underrepresented groups such as women and people with disabilities, and are trying to enhance our training and curriculum to be able to include people that might have hard of hearing or poor eyesight. So when I talk about the mapping, there's really three ways that we do it for OpenStreetMap. So we never want to be duplicating data that is perhaps already out there. So the first one is looking at importing existing data sets that are allowed to be open, and we can pull those into OpenStreetMap following the guidelines. The second is we map remotely through digitizing satellite imagery. And that's really just generally you're doing the outline of building footprints, road networks, and waterways. And then once that information is in OpenStreetMap, it's a lot easier to go out on the ground and collect detailed attribute information, normally through an Android phone app called OpenMapKit, which lets you customize your questionnaires to make it very easy through multiple choice what information you should be collecting, and then it also syncs up so you can load that back into OpenStreetMap quite easily. This is just an example of generally the tools that we go out into the field with for our ground collection data. So that's the phone there just has the interface of OpenMapKit with the survey below it of the attributes that you're going to collect. We also use field papers to help navigate once we're out in the field, or GPS, and at least in Indonesia and Uganda, we found it quite easy to get around by motorbike and cover a lot of ground quickly that way. So yeah, Missing Maps is an organization that HOT works closely with, and they are trying to get people on the map, putting people, the world's most vulnerable people on the map. So rather in the response of a crisis or a disaster, they're trying to do more in preparation areas that aren't on the map, holding these mapathons and getting people together just to learn about OpenStreetMap and do mapping in the evening with maybe some pizzas and beers. And the last area that HOT really focuses on is technical projects. So we have a number of tools that we've developed to help that surround the OpenStreetMap data. So we have the Tasking Manager, which really focuses on creating data in OpenStreetMap, and you can see the grids in the image on the left. So it really helps to just break up and organize different sections of an area of interest, and it really does this so that when you have maybe hundreds of volunteers wanting to map at the same time, it keeps it in order so that people aren't trying to edit the same place and you have data conflicts. It also makes sure that it goes through 2 rounds of of mapping. So you have someone that initially does it, they say it's complete, and then it will go into a second round of validation so that someone is checking that the mapping has been done correctly. We also have OSM Analytics, which lets you do what it says. You can analyze the OpenStreetMap data. Currently, you can look at building and road data specifically, but it also has a time frame comparison, so you can look at compare between two different dates what data was mapped and how many buildings and how many roads have been mapped between those two times. And then we also have the export tool. The export tool, which looks at extracting that data from OpenStreetMap. So we've developed it so that it'd be really easy to customize what area you would like to take the data from and select features for export as well, and then convert it into different file formats like shapefiles, KML, and GPS, Garmin GPS files. So a recent collaboration that we've had was with HDX, the Humanitarian Data Exchange. And we really took the export tool, which we're currently developing for version 3, and part of that was to build an integration that would just be used by the HDX team so that they could customize data sets that would be pushed through to HDX. And it could be they can choose when they would want it to be updated, as well as choose the certain features that they want. So I think a lot of them are set to be updated weekly because, of course, OpenStreetMap is it's always evolving. There's always new data being added, edits being made, so you want to have the data as up to date as possible. So we were working with the team, and that's now gone live. So it's really streamlined, and they're slowly working on scaling up to get as many countries as possible out and available on their platform. Currently, they are focusing on 4 data sets. They have buildings, roads, waterways, and points of interest. So I believe, we have a video. So I'm just going to ask Cedric if he could play the video, which will show you how you can actually access this OpenStreetMap data on the Humanitarian Data Exchange.
Yeah, give me just a quick minute here.
Frederick, while you're uploading the video, Mahari, could you take a couple of minutes to describe the common traits that you see for organizations that use hot and open data in general well?
Yeah, so at least for collaborating with HOT, there is I wouldn't say there's common traits between any of the organizations because they all work quite differently. The biggest thing is communication and just getting in touch and actually seeing what the different needs are. And most of it is just kind of constant communication. And like our organization and the data, it's being really open. So yeah, I think we've been very lucky. Every organization that we've worked with has been very successful. So I think it is just approaching and chatting to each other, which makes it work really well.
Yeah, so collaboration is key. I see this is about an 8-minute video here, Hari. So let me play it. But if there's a point of time you want me to close it down, then do let me know. Just send me a private message on the chat window.
In this video,
So in interest of time, I think we're going to stop it there. Hari, sorry to do that, but I'd also want Godfrey to be able to be present. We promised to post this entire video on the webinar page. So Hari, I'm going to give you control back so you can finish up your slides.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very quick. There's not that many left now. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so you'll be able to watch the rest of the video later, which will help you understand a bit more of the HDX site. So yeah, I just want to show some examples of what you could do with OpenStreetMap data. So this is just an example of, for flood modeling, the combination of an SRTM 30-meter resolution with OpenStreetMap data. They produced a high-resolution surface model. Here they used OpenStreetMap data in the InnoSafe QGIS plugin, which creates models hazard scenarios. And this just shows the inundation of Dar es Salaam during different flooding periods. And here the OpenStreetMap data was used to help in a large-scale yellow fever campaign in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So they knew where to target mosquito fumigation and distribute vaccinations. And here it was used to create a public transportation map in Managua in Nicaragua. There was no bus map route in the capital city where about 80% of the inhabitants relied on the buses to commute to work and school. So they mapped out the 42 bus lines in OpenStreetMap and produced these maps for public. And so yeah, so why OpenStreetMap? And really it's because of the community. There's really power in numbers and the openness for everyone to produce amazing data, to empower them to put themselves on the map. And really it's because not all governments can do it by themselves, not only governments, organizations, institutes, individuals. Governments, they might not have the capacity or the capability and the funding, so this really is helping with maybe the funding in one project will do the mapping in an area, but then it's open and it's available for everyone to use for whatever purposes and needs that they have. Yeah, so thank you. That's all for me, but if you have any questions, I guess we'll have time at the end, but please feel free to contact me directly via email or also through Twitter. Thank you.
There's been quite a few questions that have been lined up, so we'll take care of those towards the end of the hour. I'm giving Godfrey control at this point. So Godfrey, feel free to share your desktop and present your slides. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Just wanted to check if you can hear me and see my my screen.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And just want to start by thanking NetHope for giving us this opportunity to talk about open data in the humanitarian sector, something that we at HDX are really passionate about. And we're just going to talk today about the newest lessons in open data, in using open data effectively, and also going to touch on a little bit about the integration the wonderful integration that we did with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team. So to get us started, I'm just going to introduce the HDX project and just talk a little bit more about what we do and how we work to enable open data sharing in the humanitarian sector. So what is HDX? So HDX is UN OCHA's open platform for sharing humanitarian data with the objective of making humanitarian data easy to find and also easy to use for analysis. So so we offer basically a data repository where we users can share data, and you can all find data in one place. So data on HDX is shared through organizations, and we have about 288 member organizations that are sharing relevant humanitarian data on HDX. I'll show you a slide later on with some of the organizations that are on HDX. Over 4,900 different data sets are being shared on HDX, and these are across different countries, different crises, different sectors, and different types of data such as baseline data, geodata, data on needs, and all of these can be found on HDX, and more are coming on board. So 5,000 registered users, but over 250,000 unique visitors that are coming to the site. So the initiative has really been growing since it was launched in July of 2014. It's about 3 years ago. So here is a snapshot of some of the partners that we're working with, and I mentioned about 288, so I could not fit them all over here. So how data assurance, quality assurance works on HDX is, as I mentioned earlier, the data on HDX is shared through organizations. So we have organizations that apply or request to share data on HDX by just going to the HDX website that I'll share with you, and the HDX team will approve organizations. First of all, we have to make sure that they are bona fide humanitarian organizations. Also that we also have a discussion with them about the terms and of the service on things that they are allowed to post and things that are not allowed, and how the collaboration would work. And after that, once we have an organization, they are approved and they can start sharing data on HDX. But each and every data set that is shared, we also put it through a quality assurance framework where we look at several factors and issues on the data, just to make, for instance, that it is properly sourced, that it has a description, that the methodology used to collect that data is all spelled out, and other pieces of quality assurance that we look at. One of the things that we are very serious about is the protection of the privacy of the recipients of aid, as well as the aid workers that provide this aid. So we do not allow any data that contains any personally identifiable information, and this is also part of the quality assurance that we do on each and every data set that is shared on HDX. Right. So what is it that we actually offer the humanitarian community? So as I mentioned, we are a data sharing platform. So we provide a simple data sharing space where people can find data, and they can also share data. So here are some examples of people going on Twitter, really talking about some of the ways that HDX has helped them as they work with open data. So they on Hurricane Matthew, when our friends from I think this was the Red Cross shared Humanitarian Hurricane Matthew data set, people were able to find it easily, and and as time has gone on, people are now beginning to use HDX as the first place that they go to look for data when something has happened or they're looking for a certain data set. So this is something that we are happy about, that we provide this platform that can simplify data sharing. The other thing that we also do is to extend the impact of data, and this is through increasing the visibility of data to help data contributors reach a larger audience. Like I mentioned, about 250,000 visitors to our site. So this can really help provide some publicity for your data. Also, in terms of user feedback, sometimes there might be some minor errors, small mistakes here and there in data that are really hard to spot. But once it is out there, some people might be able to pick this up and help improve the data set as time goes on. And so this is also something that is useful. And because we have different data from different organizations, we can help to put together data from these different sources, which can then be combined and used together to come up with new insights that may have not been realized had only a single data set been used. So that is one of the extending the impact of data on HDX. And the other thing that's also very important and also related to impact is just to tell the story of the data. While we have a lot of data savvy people contributing data on HDX, we also have a lot of other people who are interested in this data, but sometimes lack the skills to actually use that data. And on HDX, we provide a number of data visualizations that really open up this data to a wider audience, and they can understand the data much more faster. And for example, here you can see this was a survey. I believe that was done in Tanzania, talking about access to education in Tanzania. And of course, this data is available as a spreadsheet that you can download and use in your tool of choice. But we also provide this tool for this visualization for looking at this data in a visual way, and to draw your own insights from the data. So this is so for those data sets that come in and have the right kind of appeal, HDX will work with the organization, share the data to do these kinds of visualizations. And one of the other things that we also do is help to standardize data across humanitarian operations. So we have what we call the common operational data sets that are available on HDX. And these common operational data sets, be they administrative boundaries or population figures and other types of data, help humanitarian analysis be based on the same core set of data. And when we talk about certain places or certain locations, we all know we are talking about the same place. So this is one of the other benefits of HDX. Now, just like just to talk a little bit from the experience that we have had now for over 3 years working on open data, just want to summarize what are the best practices for open data sharing. The first one, and this should be obvious, is that people should just try as hard as they can to share data. There are many things, there are many reasons why people have not been sharing. Most of them cultural, maybe it could be sensitivities around the data, but the best practice is to have a mindset where sharing is considered a normal part of business, in much the same way as, for instance, we would share reports or annual reports and other documents. We should also think to do the same for data. The other best practice is automation. If you have the expertise within house, it is best to automate data sharing, because sometimes doing it manually can become maybe a bit difficult. But once you automate the process, then you'd have to only do it once, and then the machines will take over to keeping this data up to date, and keeping it available with minimal need for intervention from people. So this is a best practice that we would encourage organizations who want to get into sharing open data to also do. It is also important, critically important, to standardize data, especially when it's being shared. When it is now shared and it has to be combined with other data sets, it is a lot of time will be saved if we all use standard, well-known standards. So one of the ways that we are also supporting this best practice of standardization is we are supporting the development of the Humanitarian Exchange language, which is a simple hashtag-based standard for sharing spreadsheet data, and we would encourage, and we're going to be building tools that leverage this standard to encourage more use of these tools, of these standards. And then the final best practice is really to just document, to provide metadata for data, because once the data is openly shared, we would not be around to sort of explain what is meant by a certain column or how certain things were arrived at. But having good documentation really makes it easier for data users to quickly incorporate your data into their products, and to also use the data in the correct way. So on that note, I'm just going to also just use the OSM data integration HDX as an example of best practice, where they clearly already they shared the data, they automated the sharing, it's standardized, and it is well documented, and they have a tool that I will not really repeat too much, but they have a tool that collects on a regular basis, that collects or extracts data from OSM and makes it available on HDX, and this is tailored for the kinds of data that humanitarians would find useful. The 5 data sets that Mihari mentioned, and these are automatically added to and updated on HDX on a weekly basis, and this is a great innovation. Right, and this is basically how the tool works. It clips data for different country, and then the tool creates the data sets on OSM, and then linked to HDX using the HDX Python library. Right, and then finally, I'm just going to touch a little bit on the Center for Humanitarian Data, which is that is being established in the Hague, and it's going to be opening doors this August, in about a few weeks time. The idea, once again, is to connect people and data to improve lives, and it was born out of the experiences working on HDX, but also realizing that some of the issues around data sharing are bigger than and broader than data sharing. So the center is going to look at these other areas. So the first focus of the center is going to be around data services, and data services. This is where HDX is going to be sitting in, where we're going to be providing the platform and other tools to enable the sharing of data. Another area that the center will look at is data policy, trying to and we will build a data policy for use in the humanitarian sector and promote the responsible sharing of data in the sector. The other focus area is going to be on data literacy. Our finding was that most of the humanitarian workers come from a liberal arts background and might not have had formal training in numerical methods and, or working with data, and would just like to come in there and try to bring this kind of knowledge and training to the sector, and also offer advanced courses and training for seasoned information management officers. And all of this is going to be underpinned by a network engagement piece, where we're going to be working with working to build a data community around humanitarian data. And on that note, I will end it here and just thank you so much for listening, and hand it back to Frederick. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Godfrey, and also thank you to Mahari. Very, very informative information. We do have 5 more minutes, and we're going to take a few of the questions. We're probably not going to be able to cover all the questions, but we'll work with the speakers on generating a Q&A document that we will post to the Solution Center after the session here. But let me start from the top, and then we'll just take as many questions as we have time for. And this may be a question for both of you. Is there a place where one can find tools for both HDX and for OpenStreetMap? And what are some of the training resources that are available?
Yeah, so for OpenStreetMap, probably one of the current best places would be to go to Learn OSM website, and it kind of takes you through some of the different tools and how to use them. We're actually working on the HOT website to make that also a place that you can go and just find out about all the different tools that we've created as well around OpenStreetMap.
Godfrey, any particular tools or pointers? And also see that Becky is posting quite a few links in the chat window, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, I think yeah, I'll just echo what Becky says. You can go to the website posted, and you can find most of the info there on our FAQ section.
Excellent. I think we have time for a couple more questions, and while we're doing that, I'm going to take control back and display the webinar satisfaction poll, and people can just go right in there and answer the questions directly. Appreciate anybody's participation. The next question I thought was quite interesting was who controls the attributes for the various locations and use cases, both maybe for OpenStreetMap and for HDX?
Yeah, so there's no one, because OpenStreetMap is an open database, there's no one in particular that controls the data for any area. It's really available for any, like Wikipedia, anyone can go in and change it. And we do get that question quite a lot, that, you know, potentially someone could go in and maybe not on purpose, but kind of jeopardize the accuracy of the data. And there are different tools built around kind of monitoring that. So if there's chain sets which record different changes in there, if they look dubious, they're kind of flagged up. Because there are also organizations like Mapbox that are quite invested in making sure that the data stays accurate. So they've also developed systems that compare it to other existing data sets for accuracy. But really, there is always that possibility of how accurate is the data. For the most part, in our experience, people don't tend to go in and change it or mess it up intentionally. It might just be a mistake, and generally someone picks up on it quite quickly.
Godfrey, anything on your end? There was a question specifically a little bit later on in terms of, if you have data from multiple different sources, how do you standardize the data attributes and the data model in terms of, in order to provide for aggregation of the data?
Yes. So for this one, this is where I mentioned the Excel standard, and we're going to post the link to that, which is a standard that we have developed, really thinking about those kinds of problems where we have disparate different types of actors with different data models and different, maybe even different coding schemas that they are using, and we'd just like to try and use a simple standard that we've found could be very helpful in doing most of the work that is required to be able to join these different types of data sets together.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We are at the top of the hour, and unfortunately, we're not able to answer all of the questions that were submitted. But as I said, Gabby and I will definitely be working with the speakers to try to get them all answered, and we will post those to the webinar posting on the NetHub Solutions Center. It remains for me to thank both Mahari and Godfrey, and also Gabby for producing this series. This has been very, very interesting, and I also thank all the attendees for excellent questions throughout. And I want to wish everybody a great rest of your day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be. And we'll be back in touch in a week or so. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.